So just recently we got the huge announcement of Forza Horizon 5 and yes, it looks amazing. Maybe I am overhyping it a little in my head since the game is so overdue at this point, but it genuinely does look incredible. I may make a video eventually talking about my thoughts on the game, but I have something else I would like to tackle first, and that is specifically the car list. Now obviously Forza Horizon 4 now has over 750 cars, which isn't a number to be scoffed at. That's a lot of content, but then again, there's always more to add. Forza Horizon 5, of course, is going to bring new cars. For example, already we've seen the new Ford Bronco, the new Land Rover Defender, and of course there's the AMG Project 1, which are all really cool. First timers to the series, so I'm really excited to get behind the wheel of them. But I have a whole list of cars that I want to see in the New Mexico landscape. Some of these cars are cars that appeared in previous Horizon titles and motorsport titles that have become strangely absent in subsequent titles, and some are those yet to make their Horizon debut. Now obviously, I don't work for Playground or handle copyright law and licensing on a day-to-day basis, which is why I'm prefacing this video by saying this is my dream roster if I suddenly became in control of the series and could add any of the cars that I wanted. These are the ones that I would choose. Also, we're going to be getting new Horizon 5 trailers a lot over the next few months and weeks, so if any of these cars are miraculously announced before the video comes out, I apologise. I do not have the power of foresight. Anyway, no more exposition. Here are the cars that I want added to Forza Horizon 5. Abarth. Now, while Abarth isn't really my favourite brand, I would love to see the Punto Supersport make a return from Forza Horizon 2, as it would just give Abarth some identity that's other than just the Fiat 500. Other than that, it's a pretty standard hot hatch, but hey, more the merrier. Alpine. Alpine have a few cars that I would like to see. First of all is the GTA Le Mans. This was last present in Forza Horizon 3 and it was a fun car to mess around with. By proximity, you could also add the A6 110, a sports car that never really took off like its peers and is generally forgotten about. I'd also like the A3 110, specifically the model with the V6. AMC, the Pacer X, again last available in Forza Horizon 3. I've said before, I think the Pacer is one of the ugliest little cars I've ever seen, but that doesn't mean we can't have some fun with it. Aston Martin, firstly the V8 Vantage, specifically the version from the 90s, seen in Forza Horizon 3, absent in 4, you probably begin to sense a pattern here. Perhaps we'd be deserving of the V600 version, which is obviously the most superior version. I'd also like to see the Signet. Now hold on, before you begin to scream at me, let me explain myself. Basically, the city car itself is pretty stupid and not a great car. I think it's based on the Toyota IQ, like it's a badge engineered thing, but Aston Martin ended up making a one-off Signet after production ended, which was fitted with a V8. Yes, there was a V8 in this thing. That would be a fun little car to hoon around as an engine swap option, and you can't change my mind on that. BMW, the M635 CSI, another car that appeared in Forza Horizon 3, and I think it's one of the most unique looking BMWs ever made. It really does look amazing, not much else to be honest. Cadillac. The CN, a concept, sure, but a welcome one. This was a true supercar from the early 2000s, and it's not something that I think a lot of people would expect from Cadillac. It made a raunchy amount of horsepower, looked incredible, and drives like a dream. Add it, please. Chevrolet. So continuing on the saga of re-adding Forza Horizon 3 cars, the Chevrolet Supersport. It doesn't really stand out in any notable way, but I actually used this thing quite a bit in Forza Horizon 3 and I personally found it quite fun to drive, not to mention it being a more unique car for Chevrolet based on what we already have in the game. Let's also throw in the 4th gen Camaro. Sure, it's kind of ugly and not very well known, but I kind of have a soft spot for this thing, I won't lie. Chrysler. I don't really like Chrysler as a brand or many of the vehicles they produce, but let's face it, only having one offering from them in Forza Horizon 4 is a bit lame, so let's bring back another car from Horizon 3, the 300 SRT8. Just something to pad out the representation, and I think it actually looks quite cool. I also wouldn't mind seeing the Crossfire make an appearance too. Sure, like the Camaro, it's ugly as hell, but I remember using this thing occasionally back in Motorsports 3 and 4, I believe, and it's yet to make a Horizon appearance. Add to the fact that my neighbour used to have one of these and it rarely left the drive, so seeing one being able to be punted around would actually be quite fun for me. And if you really want, because of how iconic it is, maybe for all the wrong reasons, and also for the potential mods, let's also add the PT Cruiser. Let's just see how long until someone does a da baby paint job. I don't think it'll be very long. Citroën. So Citroën has won the second highest amount of manufacturers titles in the WRC, second only to Lancia, and the highest amount of drivers titles, so it's actually a real shame that they have next to no representation of this in Forza Horizon, so let's fix that. Firstly, the Cesaro WRC. I always thought this was a really cool yet underrated rally car from the early 2000s. I think it started out as like a kit car. Then there's the C4 WRC from the later 2000s, again cool yet underrated racer in the series. Another Citroën I'd like to see is the BX40C from way back in the Group B era. It was heavy, big, sluggish, slow, and completely unsuccessful on all accounts, and that's exactly why I'd like to see it. I think it looks cool, and I'd love to give it a go hooning it around the dirt in Forza. Another non-rally Citroën I wouldn't mind seeing is the Saxo VTS, which I just think is a really cool little hot hatch that deserves some more recognition. Dacia, or Dacia, I guess, and that's great news because it's the Sandero. I don't know if it would really be that fun to drive, like, at all, but I just think having the option of being able to drive one of James May's favourite ever cars would be a sweet little bonus. Datsun. The 2000 Roadster from Forza Horizon 3, never really used it, but it does look like a fun little sports car and would make for a perfect running mate to the recently added Honda S800. Di Tommaso, or De Tommaso, I'm not really fluent in Italian, but it is a more underrated Italian manufacturer that actually has a few cars to offer. Firstly, of course, let's go with their big bad, the Pantera, which I always thought as a really nice alternative to just buying the Lamborghini or the Ferrari of the day. To me, it is one of the most beautiful cars ever built, of course being jointly constructed with Ford, featuring one of their V8s. Another one I would love to try is the De Tomaso Sport 5000, also known as the P70. Only one was ever built to be a Grand Tourer, but because only one was built, it had to race under the Sport Prototype classification. It may not be the best looking car ever, but it sure as hell is unique. Add to that the fact that it was worked on by the one and only Carroll Shelby. By proxy, I'd also like to see the De Tomaso P72, which is based heavily on the aforementioned P70 with many underpinnings from the Apollo Intensa Emozione, and add to the fact that this thing is absolutely gorgeous. Ferrari. First up, let's get the SF90 Stradale into the game. Sure, it's a hybrid, which is, I understand some people don't like, but considering it is Ferrari's first ever, as well as the fact that this thing looks about as aggressive as, like, I don't know, a jet fighter, sort of have to include it. The Ferrari California, I'm much more on the fence about. We already have the T, but I don't know, I've always really liked the original California, so I don't know if I'd actually want that in, but we'll see. And I know that Forza rarely dabbles with prototypes and concepts, but please let us have the Ferrari Mythos. It is such an incredibly cool car. It looks more like a late 90s car considering it came out in the late 80s. It is heavily based on the Testarossa, which we already have in game, but I think this thing is unique enough to warrant it getting a place on the roster. Ford. Okay, I have quite a few Ford that I am demanding make an appearance. Firstly, the Thunderbird. This was a huge car for Ford in the 1950s and 60s, so it's a bit confusing as to why we've never seen one in game. Personally, I do think having an earlier version of the car would be more impactful, as who really remembers the later ones, but you never know, if Playground wanted to be a bit more adventurous, they might just add the 2002 relaunched version, despite that looking terrible. The 1995 Mustang GT from Forza Horizon 3, sure we already have the SVT Cobra R, but I love me some early SN95 Mustang. I do like the new edge design of later versions, but I don't know, the more curvy appearance of the original is just more appealing to me. The 1992 Falcon GT, again from Forza Horizon 3, looks cool, sounds great, drives like a beast. Yeah, we may as well also throw in the Mustang 2 King Cobra. Not liked at the time, but come on, we have every other generation of the Mustang. We may as well have this thing too, considering it does have its fans. I kind of like it. It is the coolest version of the Mustang too, so yeah. And yeah, let's throw in the GT90 since we already have the GT40 and GT70. One of the coolest concept cars ever built, and one that I'll be ecstatic to whip around in. Honda. Let's get some more K cars in the game for one thing, starting with the Honda Beat. Looks pretty insignificant at first glance, but I think it's kind of cute and I think it could be fun to drive around. Hyundai. Hyundai is barely represented in the Horizon series because we only get the Veloster, so let's change that. Firstly, the Coupe. I think this thing is a really stylish older model from Hyundai. I can imagine this thing being a real blast to hoon around in, especially depending on what customization we can do to it. The Genesis Coupe as well is something I'd like to see. It's very reminiscent of the original Coupe, but I still think it's unique enough to warrant a place. And yes, continuing my ever-growing need for more rallying representation, the i20 Coupe WRC. I mean, come on, it's won the last two manufacturers' titles, and I think that should get it a place in the roster. Jeep, the Grand Wagoneer, not a favourite of mine, but it was in Horizon 3, and I think it would break up the Jeep roster in Horizon as a whole, as I look at what we have in Horizon 4, and don't get me wrong, there is some cool stuff in here, but I don't know, the Grand Wagoneer is just something a bit different. It doesn't, you know, look the exact same as everything else that Jeep offers. Lamborghini, the Yalpa, for God's sake, it was in the other Horizon titles except Horizon 4, and I don't get why. Firstly, it's gorgeous, it's a gorgeous looking thing, but being an early Lambo, that was a given, as well as being fun to drive. And secondly, it's more representation of Lambo in the 80s, as we all have at the minute. All we have for the 80s is the Countach. Speaking of the Countach, I would like another version. We already do have the QV, but that's sort of it. And I think for one of the greatest supercars of all time, we need a bit more. So I'm going to stick my neck out here and ask for the 25th anniversary edition. I know a lot of people don't really like this thing, but I think it looks incredible and was also an early project of one Horatio Pagani before he went on to form, you might have heard of it, Pagani. And since I'm including concepts in this video, let's throw in the Carla. It's just cool, nothing more to say. Lancia, right, Lancia. They already have a great amount of representation in Horizon 4 with all their major rallying triumphs getting a spot. But Lancia does have other cars. Firstly, the Monte Carlo, the original 037 before it was turned into the 037. It's not the fastest or most luxurious Italian sports car ever built, but my god, does it look the part, and I do believe it is one of Lancia's greatest non-rallying offerings. I'd also like to see the Thema, I'm going to go with Thema. Sure, it looks like a boring executive car on the outside, but if we're talking about the 832 version, open the bonnet up and you find a Ferrari V8, and maybe, yeah, this could actually be a really fun car to drive. I'd also like to see the Hyena. This was a car based on the Delta Integrale, built in very small numbers by Italian coach builder Zagato. It's unique looking, in a good way, and would be another fun little car to throw about, as well as the fact that it's completely unknown by the general public. Land Rover. Originally here I did have the new Defender, but looks like we don't have to worry about that now because it was literally in the trailer being driven. So my only want for this brand is an original Discovery, whether that be a 1 or 2. I do have a lot of personal connection to this car based on the fact that my dad owned 3 throughout my lifetime, but simultaneously these things have been known to be amazing off-roaders and actually good project cars when they're not breaking down. Sure, it's stupid to introduce this as we're leaving the UK for Mexico, but who knows, it could make for an amazing Baja racer. Lexus, not a brand I'm overly familiar with. I'd just like to see the SC300 make a return from Horizon 3. Again, unique for Lexus, but also something I drove a bit in Horizon 3 and I'd like to do so again. Lotus, the Viger, easily one of the coolest and craziest cars on this list. I mean, Lotus have always managed to push the boundaries on the cool axis, but this thing really is incredible. Sure, it is electric, which some people might not be too interested in, but at least the Rimac would get a running mate. Mazda. So we just got 2 new Mazdas for Forza Horizon 4, being the RX-3 and the Cosmo, but what harm is one more? The Mazda Speed 3. Once again something that needs to return from Horizon 3. After this, I'd say Mazda has one of the best overall representations of any manufacturer in the game, with, you know, most of their biggest hits getting the spotlight. Mercedes, so there's a couple I'd like to see here. First of all, the SLR McLaren. Now, I understand licensing a car produced by 2 separate manufacturers might be a bit of a roadblock, but my god, this car is absolutely amazing and is definitely one of my personal favourites offered by either brand. By proxy, I also wouldn't mind seeing the Sterling Moss edition, which omits the windscreen to appear more as a speedster. Both cars are personal loves of mine, so maybe Merc could pull through and give us a taste of them. And just for fun and to balance out the offerings we have, why not throw in the A160? It's just a funny looking cheese car that maybe, just maybe, it could actually be fun to drive, but I'm kind of doubtful on that. I'd also like to see the 600 Grosser, one of the biggest, most intimidating, most evil looking cars I've ever seen. Sure, it may be slow, but I don't think speed is what this thing is all about. It could maybe be a good role player, I don't know, a drug kingpin's car, perhaps? Mitsubishi, so there's a few I think need adding here. We already have a number of Evos in the game, but they're all later ones. We haven't got any from the majority of the 1990s. Specifically, I'd love to see either an Evo 3 or 4. Although I'm erring on the side of 3 because I love Koichi Sudo so much. The FTO is another one I'd like. I think this one's a little bit underrated for Mitsubishi as it wasn't exported to many markets, but it looks like a fun little coupe, and being that I've seen one being driven around my uni campus multiple times, I think it's finally time that I got behind the wheel. The Pajero. Mitsubishi is known for making nothing much else other than 4-wheel drive crossovers nowadays, but let's go back to the original proper Mitsubishi 4-wheel drive, the Pajero. Being that a lot of this Mexico map is going to be off-road, something like this would fit right in. Hey, they could even maybe give us a couple of body kits and we could turn it into a little camel trophy racer. Now, that's an idea, if I do say so myself. And just to round off the Mitsubishi rallying lineage, the Lancer 1600 GSR, which is the predecessor to the Evo, an older rallying legend, yes, but it's one that could be insanely fun to drive with the right customization, and again, it's Mexico, so it's gonna fit. MG. Sure, so we have got some classic MGs in Horizon, but MG is still a thing. What about more modern MG offerings? Starting with the SZR, a hot hatch version of the Rover 25, I believe. I've actually seen this thing a lot around my ends, so I think seeing it in Horizon will be a fun little romp. Then there's the X-Power SV, a car based on offerings from De Tomaso and used parts from the Mustang. It's a bit of a forgotten model from modern MG, but it really is the real deal with a proper Ford V8 making around 380 horsepower. And yes, it is awesome looking, and it's actually quite unique looking for a British manufacturer, Nissan. The Stagia, again, a car I'm not overly familiar with, but I'm always up for more estate representation, especially if said estate is the 260 RS version, which looks amazing. This is a sexy little car. I've seen a lot of people call it the R34 wagon, but I think it's more unique than that, and I think more people should have the opportunity to be able to drive it. Opel. Most of these cars could also be implemented as Vauxhalls and vice versa, but since we already have a fair few Vauxhalls, let's have a couple of Opels, bring them to the stage. Firstly, the GT. Truly beautiful sports car from the 60s that I sort of see as a German version of the Toyota 2000 GT, and you could also go on to include the relaunch version of the GT, Roadster, Speedster, whatever, from 2007, but in many ways it is very similar to the VX200, and being that it is badge engineered, I'd like to see it as the original version, which we'll get to, that is coming. Peugeot, boy, do I have a few Peugeots I want to add into this series, because the general consensus and the views of Peugeot these days is that they're boring, and we've only got 1980s Peugeots in the game and they're only 205, so let's fix that. Firstly with the 206 WRC, like the Cesaro WRC, won the World Rally Championship 3 years consecutively, so I think that needs a bit of representation. The Peugeot 306 Maxi 2 is another classic rally car from Peugeot that isn't the 205, because they did offer cars other than that, and the 306 Maxi looks much more humble on the outside, but it is a proper little kit car. This is a little monster. Not just rally cars, we have the 106 GTI. You could add a number of GTIs. This is just the one I chose. It's one of my favourite little hot hatches. It's fantastic. Can you tell I like hot hatches? Because I really do. But yeah, the 106 GTI is one of my favourites. And finally, the 405 T16 looks like a normal, humble family car, but put the T16 badge on the end, and you have one of the coolest cars that Peugeot ever made. Hopefully, customization options will allow us to add the fat wagon splitters that you might see on a Pikes Peak version, but here's hoping that that might be an opportunity for us. Plymouth. A brand, again, I'm not really familiar with much at all, but to hell with it, the Prowler. Yeah, it's odd and in many ways completely and utterly stupid looking, but you know what? That's why I want it in. Add that to the fact that it was in Horizon 3, and all signs point to this being included. Please, it would just be fun. Pontiac. So let's start off with one that needs to make a return, the Fiero GT. It was only ever seen in Motorsport 4, and I think it could have been one of the most unique and singular American cars that could possibly be added, especially if you include all the proper engine swaps, you know, the factory fitted V6, but all the V8s that Fiero owners choose to add too. Just please, this is one of my biggest personal wants, so let's see if my Christmas wish could come true. I'd also like to see the Pontiac Solstice, which went on to form the aforementioned Opel GT Roadster. It was one of Pontiac's final offerings before the brand was shut down permanently, and is the successor to the aforementioned Fiero. Again, a really unique car for the country, and one that I actually kind of like despite all of the hate it gets. Rolls-Royce. Now, an entire brand that needs to make a reappearance, not just one car. It was in the Horizon series as recent as 3, yet when the franchise comes to the UK, one of the most quintessentially British brands get us omitted. It is stupid. So very stupid. I wouldn't mind them making a comeback in Mexico, to be honest. You know, bring us the Phantom, the Silver Shadow, the Dawn, the Ghost, the Corniche. You know what? I'll also take the Cullinan. That's a nice looking car. Sure, it's not everyone's favourite brand out there, but I do miss some of these cars, and a reintroduction with some newer models might be the ticket to getting more people on side. Rover. We only have one Rover in Horizon 4, being the SD1 Vitesse, mind you. It is a cool model, but I say we get some more in. Firstly, the 75 V8. Sure, like the Thamer, the base 75 looks like a boring old executive car, but throw in the Rover's first V8 since the end of the SD1, and you got yourself another pretty meaty little offering from the Brits. The 216 GSI, pretty unremarkable at first glance, and perhaps it is among the sea of ever-growing hot hatches, but I basically want it here because I remember seeing one of these driving around my hometown multiple times, and I always thought it looked insanely cool. Then again, I was a mere child, so most cars painted red looked insanely cool to me. Saab, another manufacturer made strangely absent in recent titles, not being seen since Motorsport 4. I say bring them back because despite them being out of business now, they have a great catalogue of cars that need to hit the roads again under the Horizon banner. The 93 Aero, the 93 Turbo X, the 99 Turbo, the 96 V4, the Sonnet, the 92, I could go on. Saab have made some amazing cars over the years, and it's a shame that they've never appeared in a Horizon game. Let's change that. Seat. Wow, another brand yet to make their mark on the Horizon series, and boy would some of these fit the franchise. The Leon Cupra, the Ibiza Cupra, the Cordoba GTI, the Ibiza Bimotor, etc, etc. Seat have always been great at building, you guessed it, the hot hatch, and I personally think that Seat would be one of the most welcome brands to make their big entry into the series. Shelby. Now, what could Shelby really offer other than Mustangs and the Cobra? Well, the Series 1, a hugely unknown roadster from the 1990s. It was Carroll Shelby's first and only ever car that he designed from the ground up from nothing, and surely that would warrant it a spot. It's a piece of history. Sure, the reason it's mostly forgotten is because it didn't really end up being that critically well received, but hey, not every car has to be immensely popular to warrant a spot in the Horizon roster. Skoda. Geez, another brand beginning with S, yet to make their mark on the Horizon series. Skoda, despite being pretty meh and kinda forgettable today, have made some pretty outstanding cars throughout history. There's the Octavia VRS, the Octavia WRC, the Fabia R5, the Fabia VRS, there's the Rapid, the 130LR, the list again could go on. Another manufacturer that has become largely overlooked these days, but hopefully if these cars were introduced, some long forgotten memories could be resurfaced. Smart. One single appearance in the Forza series, and that was all the way back in Motorsport 4, so maybe we can try bring it back. We may as well firstly introduce the 4.2. It's not the fastest, most powerful, or even the best looking car in the world, but I guess it's kind of unique, and there is even an upgraded version courtesy of Brabus that could also make an appearance. We may also throw in the Roadster Coupe. Sure, like the 4.2, not the fastest etc, despite appearing to be a nippy little bugger, it only had a 0.7 litre inline 3, making it surprisingly sluggish, but hey, that's why customization and upgrades come in, and maybe it could be turned into something more worthy of the Roadster subtitle. Subaru, sure. Subaru's mostly got all of their big hits in Horizon 4, but there are a couple more I wouldn't mind getting to for a bit of variation, starting with the Forester STI. Definitely a great alternative for Subi fans if they aren't feeling the WRX, and the Forester is a personal favourite of mine. I'm also highly requesting the Bug-Eye WRX. We already have all the other generations of the Impreza in-game, so it's kind of sad for me that my personal favourite of them isn't present, but maybe we could change that playground. Go on, make me a happy little bugger. Let's also throw in the SVX, which was present in Horizon 3. Again, not a car I've used much, but as Subarus go, it's pretty unique, and I actually think it looks rather elegant, as Subis go. Lastly, the Baja Turbo. I mean, look at this thing. It would just fit right in. I mean, we're literally going to Mexico. This thing would just work. It's also literally called the Baja, and you know, add a few customizations and upgrades and body modifications, and I'd say this could be a very, very nice little number. Maybe even a secondary cover car to go alongside the AMG Project 1, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. Suzuki, another cool K car, the Suzuki Cappuccino. If you've watched 4th Stage, you'll know that in the right conditions, cars like these can actually be pretty challenging, so the more the merrier. I also think this thing is just so insanely cute. It could maybe ride alongside the Peel P50 and the Peel Trident, you know, the little tiny cars that throw in a big enough engine, they could actually turn into quite dangerous monsters. Let's also throw in the Suzuki Swift Sport, because actually it's kind of a rorty car, and even though I don't really know much about Suzuki, I know that this thing would be amazing. Tesla. Now, okay, I know that a lot of petrol heads have a particular aversion to this brand, but you have to admit they make some of the most unique cars out there, and there's a whole catalogue that you could add. The Model S, the Model X, there's the Roadster, we got the original Roadster, and then the brand new Roadster that isn't out yet, and just because I can't really think of any other cool models, and also because it would be kind of funny, the Cybertruck. Maybe Elon has something against the Horizon series, but I wouldn't mind seeing these things come back after appearing in Horizon 2 and 3. Toyota. Now, boy, have we got a few to go through here. Let's get the obvious one out of the way, the Mark V A90 Supra. Obviously, this was going to be a pick, and I would actually be pretty shocked if this thing wasn't added to Horizon 5. Personally, I see this car being the most likely out of any that I've mentioned in this video. Who knows, while I'm making this video, it might already have been announced. Same goes to the GR Yaris. Me, personally, being a Yaris owner, even though it's only a 10-year-old 1.3, I'd love this thing in game, and I would yet again be shocked that if it wasn't added. I'd also like to add the 7th gen Celica. This is a car I don't see much love going to, but personally I love it. It's not my favourite in the lineup, but certainly not my least favourite either. The Starlet. It's an overlooked little car, the predecessor to the Yaris, and it will be insanely fun to upgrade and throw around. Let's also throw in the Sora, again not as well known as other Toyotas, but has a number of great body kits and mods that will make it fun to drive. Vauxhall. So firstly, I'd like to add the Astra GTE based on the Mark II Astra. We don't really have many older Opels and Vauxhalls in the game, and I think the Astra GTE is just another great addition to the lineup, a truly classic hot hatch from the 1980s. Let's also throw in another GTE, I'm thinking the Nova, either that or the Nova GSI. Cool little car, nothing more. Vector. A really cool supercar manufacturer from the US who brings up to bat first the W8. This was always such an amazing car to me as a kid, and I think truly looks like an American Lambo, way more aggressive with a 6-litre V8. It'd just be so cool to see something like this. Let's also throw in this, the WX8, a prototype race car from 2007 that looks strangely like an A80 from the front, but I still find this thing cool. A 7-litre V8 stock, but apparently there were versions fitted with a 10-litre engine that could reach speeds of up to 270 miles an hour. I mean, come on. Volkswagen. And finally, we come to VW. I'll wrap up my saga of wanting to include more WRC cars with the Golf WRC. Won the championship 4 times, so let's get it in there. At a viewer's request, we'll also throw in the Polo GTI, definitely an underrated little number compared to its big brother in the Golf, and I'm always looking for some variation. We'll also throw in the Lupo GTI, just so long as I get the chance to swap in some massive engines just to build the ultimate sleeper car. The last two revolve around the W12 engine. Firstly, the W12 Synchro concept from the late 90s, or maybe the Nardo concept from 2001. It was VW's first and only supercar, and it's honestly a shame that Volkswagen had never built a supercar themselves, because this thing looks amazing. So getting this thing up and running in Mexico would be a real treat. Then finally there's the Phaeton. Not very exciting at face value, sure, but it was sold for a time with the aforementioned W12 engine, so we may as well chuck this in too, because you never know, it could actually be quite fun. Well, there is my list. Obviously, I couldn't include every car from every manufacturer that isn't currently in the Forza Horizon game, so if there are any cars that I missed that you want in Horizon 5, let me know in the comments below. I'm sure I have missed many, even while reading this script. I have thought of about 5 cars that I could have added, but hey, that's just hindsight. Thank you so much for watching, with a very special thanks to Ben Wright and Bryn Palmer, who are very generously donating at the highest tier on my Patreon. Just £1 a month is an amazing help, and I also have a Discord server and an Instagram page, links in the description below. Again, thank you for watching, and take care.